This was the George R. Brown Convention Center where the National NAACP convention met. And I'm going to play part of what Benjamin Hooks said at that meeting. This was one company, two companies, three companies, four. I mean, this was another event. I'm merging two different events at the George R. Brown Convention Center. They were always at the Black Expos. And this is Hooks there in a Salem cigarette ad. And this is the Philip Morris companies. And this is what Dr. Hooks was saying. I won't play the whole thing, but
I'm pleased to acknowledge tonight that one of our greatest contributors across the years have been the Philip Morris companies. The Philip Morris companies today sponsor this dinner. Philip Morris, that's like him a great big man. Philip Morris is a long.
This tape was sent to me by a friend who was at that meeting.
And a supporter of equal opportunity. They did not just come to the table lately. We can remember when Philip Morris was a target of white supremacist boycotts because back in the 1950s they insisted on having an integrated workforce and because of its support for black organizations. We remember when Philip Morris was a pioneer in hiring blacks for non-traditional jobs in industry. Today, we know that Philip Morris is a leader in corporate support for community organizations, minority business and vending programs, and affirmative action. Philip Morris has been regularly cited by Black Enterprise magazine as one of the country's best places for black people to work. Philip Morris is a major supporter of Black College, a company that cares. And I want to tell you something, we're happy that they're sponsoring this dinner tonight. This means that we can use the money to increase and enhance our programmatic departments. It's appropriate also because the Spingarn Medal honors achievers who are models for our youth. And Philip Morris is a high-achieving company that is a model for corporate social responsibility.
It's just astounding.
I want to say two things that are not on this script. But some reporter asked me, were black leaders afraid to speak out because tobacco and alcohol companies give us some money? And without any disrespect to anybody here, I said, why don't you go and ask the publisher of the New York Times? Why don't you ask the publisher of Time Magazine, Newsweek, Business Week? Why is it that when black folk get a dime, somebody thinks we're selling out, and white folk get $1 million and nobody ever asks them, are they selling out? That's a damn racist question, and I want you to know, members of the press, I consider it so. I'm not for sale to anybody. Jesse Jackson's not for sale. John Jacob, Andrew Young, all the rest of the black leaders, Corral Scott, we're not for sale. But if the tobacco companies want to give us some money to help us move black people forward in the name of God, give it, and we're going to forward and accept it and receive it and use it to build a stronger America. I want that clearly understood. And anybody that asks that question, you tell them they're racist.
Well, I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, he's just getting wound up there. But I mean, fortunately, I ran into somebody at an expo from Campbell Soup. And we got talking, because I was there to take pictures of the Benson and Hedges and so forth. And he was wonderful. He said, I said, you don't look happy. He says, you wouldn't be happy either if you were sitting there next to a cigarette booth. I said, well, that's why I'm here. And we started talking, we shared cards, and then about a year later, Campbell Soup sponsored one of the very first conferences on health in the African American population in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was wonderful. So I think that was a company with real responsibility, and he was just sitting there steaming, and his booth was right next to the Philip Morris booth. So there, again, this was a company that nobody criticized, nobody wanted to speak out against. And I could tell you stories that make your hair stand on end about what they were doing. This is just a typical year. I went to In one calendar year, I went to 41 tobacco-sponsored events in the city of Houston, such as Club Benson and Hedges, Benson and Hedges Blues. This was in New York City, another Benson and Hedges Blues. Then you had the Cool Jazz Festival, the whole romanticism of the cool, the big thing. And then I went to the Ebony Fashion Fair sponsored by More Cigarettes, which is R.J. Reynolds. This was actually a shot from that particular.
With today's Great American Smokeout, Morin also recommended that all states ban the sale of tobacco to anyone under 18. The cigarette industry's own code forbids promotion aimed at people under 21. But one group targeted by cigarette manufacturers is the black community. And CBS News correspondent Bob Fall has a report on that.
Black Americans are smoking more than white Americans, and they're getting sicker from heart disease and lung cancer.
Lung cancer is now 50% higher among black men compared to white men. Cigarette smoking is causing an awful lot of deaths in the black community.
But in the inner city, the message to light up is overwhelming. The tobacco companies know a market when they see it.
Can't get away from it. It's all around us.
No, it's not good for the community to have that many boo-boos around, ain't it? Because that's enticing kids to smoke cigarettes.
The tobacco industry has also carefully cultivated the black market by sponsoring events like this, which associate smoking with glamour, and by contributing to black charities.
Gee, I am so grateful for that.
With its gift of $1 million to the United Negro College Fund, R.J. Reynolds is the fund's biggest donor.
You wouldn't consider the tobacco industry money tainted in any way. It comes to us green. And that's all it counts. That's the important thing to the United Negro College Fund. I'm not going to pass judgment on the tobacco industry. The tobacco industry has bought off the silence of black organizations.
And in black publications where roughly 20% of advertisements urge readers to smoke, tobacco industry money can mean the difference between staying in business or going under.
That's what those cigarette companies, we're not going to take your advertising because they have too much to lose.
So black publications tend not to run anti-smoking articles.
WBLS.
That means Ebony has never published an anti-smoking article. Never.
Companies might do shy away from anti-smoking commercials.
I would be concerned as to whether or not they may ruffle some feathers within Philip Morris. They may decide to spend their advertising dollars on another radio station. If a person is receiving a large amount of money, they will not bite the hand that is feeding them. For example, when we asked the NAACP to discuss the money it gets from the tobacco industry, the NAACP refused. We asked Essence Magazine. The magazine also said no. The topic, said one of its officials, is just too sensitive.
The reluctance of black leaders to criticize the tobacco industry perplexes New York's mayor, who has chastised them in an anti-smoking radio spot.
Well, this is just another example, but the point is, this is the error, and now we're trying to make up for lost time. This is Miss Black Metroplex in Houston. This was sponsored by Salem Cigarettes. I saw her at another event. They would go to neighborhoods, and look what she's standing in front of. She's standing in front of a Salem video van that would play, it's a kind of a video boombox, and as they sampled, and people would gather around, this is what they would do. So here is another event. Let me see if I can show you this. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see.
Can I ask you not to videotape the sample?
Why's that?
Because we don't allow it.
You don't allow? Why not?
We can't because of our sampling laws. We can't allow it.
You can't allow it.
Well, I mean, she wouldn't let me photograph, but they're sampling to kids. And this was another event in the Houston main part of town behind City Hall. They called it a little kind of a game. This is a nightclub, another nightclub, the Year's Eve Bash. I went to all of these events. Again, another billboard, and everywhere you looked, every kind of store. So I went to Lloyd Parker, who was, by the way, Louis Sullivan, our Secretary of Health at that time, was beginning to speak out and was really quite a hero. Deloitte Parker was offered a Cool Achiever Award in Houston for the work that he was doing, and he turned it down. This was a $10,000 award, so he could be depicted among those people.
It's very clear to us that the black community in particular has been targeted to promote tobacco, cigarettes, and I doubt that you can find any business in this community that does not sell cigarettes. They will sell individual cigarettes for a dime, a nickel, for people who cannot buy a whole pack. They sell cigarettes to children in our communities. We have some liberation colors, red, black, and green, that we use in our movement, we've used for years. I noticed very interestingly that Salem cigarette uses red, green, and black, which if a person doesn't really think about it, they will be subliminally sucking into that as being liberation colors. So hey, we buying freedom cigarettes, liberation cigarettes, you know. And so these are just ways that they grab you.
Amazing. Just, they know exactly how to do it. Just as that campaign evolved into the 1990s, they brought back the Penguin. Now he's a little cooler, he's got shades. And they made it Cool Nights, a lot of hip-hop events. These are full-page ads. Then they had this was, I thought, a wonderful juxtaposition. On the top of the page, it says, "States ineffective in halting teen smoking," and the bottom of the ad was a Be Cool ad. The mail order, this was the pleasure goods catalog. The lotteries, the prizes, now you can enter by going online. And then the natural menthol, the whole notion of natural menthol versus artificial. The R.J. Reynolds Company had to get in on the ad. Virginia Slims, of course, has its menthol ads aimed at Latino and black populations in the women's magazines. Now we're coming up to around 2000 where the industry was besieged by lawsuits and they had to begin to change their image. So they created a series of ads with talking to the public as if they were being honest. And this, the serious health effects of smoking as if you're going to believe anything they've ever said. So these were kind of corporate ads. And this was what they were doing on university campuses when I began, well, it's still going on, but at the University of Alabama, at the recruitment, oh, I'm sorry, I want to play this because this is the highlight of the talk, and we're just about over, but.
Our interview process is very long and very rigorous because we want to make sure that they understand what they're doing. Tonight we'll meet them, tomorrow night we'll have another information session where we go into detail. We'll have a pre-screen, a panel dinner, a panel interview, a day in the field, and then an offer. So there's several opportunities for them to meet us, to learn about the industry from different angles, to make sure they're smart about what's going on.
Paradox here. You got people like me as a physician who fights smoking. Well, the way people leave the Warren says they're fighting smoking too.
Exactly.
Well, you're not saying what the things are about smoking that are really bad. You're saying it causes harm. But logically, for all fighting smoking and smoking's going to decline, what's in it for the recruit?
What's in it for the future? I mean, we just spent $300 million on a research and development center that we are creating right now. I mean, our goal,
Cigarettes.
well, no. Our goal is to not just be in the tobacco industry 20 years from now, but to come out with other products in the future.
Medication inhalers or things like that.
No, to be more like a P&G. P&G started with soap, and now we're selling potato chips. I mean, to eventually come off of tobacco products, because we know that eventually there will be no future in tobacco products.
Are you looking for the best and the brightest to in the retail area now in the territories? I mean, is that really obviously you're not looking for gold?
What do you mean, for our consumers, or you mean for recruiting purposes?
Are you looking to recruit folks that go out there and really?
She's recruiting college students to work as Marlboro territory reps.
No. We are looking for kids, part of our mission is being responsible, effective, and respected. Okay? And what we are doing is we're looking for people that can handle responsibility of marketing a product that causes harm. And in that means being responsible. It means making sure your accountants know to card everybody that comes through the store. It means making sure that you don't put tobacco products on your counters so that children, it's at eye level for children. Those are things that we try to do to be responsible.
To be responsible.
What is it in your mind that says, no, this is all?
This was the biggest thing I debated coming into the company was, my sister's worked for the company for 18 years now, yeah, and recruited me right out of college, and I was like, I don't want to work for a tobacco company, there's absolutely no way I want to do a tobacco company, but I did know a lot about the organization as a whole, and once I started to learn, I worked a couple other jobs, she really
It's just, it goes on and on and on. I want to make them responsible. They can say anything they want. And they are recruiting college students to sell Marlboros to the least, people with the least disposable income. They come on campus. They have partnered with 35 campuses in the United States. I would be at the one where they have been the closest outside of Virginia and North Carolina, University of Alabama. And I actually was thrown out of the recruitment area for trying to observe how they were recruiting college students. It's astounding, and it's the saddest thing in the world. I just want to close with a couple of words about DOC, the group that I started in 1977. We wanted to shift the focus away from lung cancer and heart disease, and we wanted to shift it onto the Marlboro instead of the disease. And we wanted to shift away from the user and onto the pusher. And so we had a conference. This was one of our super health conferences. And you'd go around Miami at that time and you'd see we're fighting for your life, the American Heart Association. And next door to it, you know, we offer you more. Because the Heart Association didn't quite get it. And you know, I think it's important to understand how the cigarette companies have always gotten the last word, even today. Even today, the tobacco companies deny any responsibility in a court of law. When these lawsuits, which are still going on, are argued, they say, well, it may cause lung cancer, but not in that plaintiff, and not in that plaintiff, and not in that group of plaintiffs. So they are lying even today. Taste Country Fresh Salem, we wanted to get up alongside these billboards, and they wouldn't let us. The billboard companies would not sell us space. So we went to the Bus Bench Company, and we welcomed people to the Taste of Country Fresh Arsenic. And you can imagine the first few times people are driving by, what's that new brand? And we actually got complaints. You didn't put the warning. Where's the warning? You know, and they thought it was a real brand. We're really trying to look at counter-advertising back then. This is 1987. During Black History Month, there's a picture of George Washington Carver, the great scientist, in a Salem cigarette ad. That shows you how low they went. And for a coupon for $1.50 off. So we went in front of the hospitals and we said, 10-year supply, only $7,000 and that's not including the medical cost. And it's a lot more expensive today. The hospitals were not pleased to see these bus benches, by the way. They had some of them removed. Look at how this is Gannett that publishes USA Today. Outdoor advertising reaches ethnic groups better than any other medium aimed at ethnic groups. They're very proud of the fact that they were aiming this garbage to ethnic groups. So we created, instead of the Virginia Slims, the emphysema Slims. You've coughed up long enough, baby. Laughing at these brand names. Benson and Hedges became Benson and Heart Attack or Benson and Stenches. You can make fun of these companies, and I challenge you to use the MSA money to ridicule the companies and get sued. You want them coming after you. You want them because then you know that you're under their skin. You want the public to say, my gosh, why are they going after them? I thought they're supposed to be fighting smoking. Must be something these companies don't like. And the devil can't stand to be mocked. The devil loves it when you call him a devil. Oh boy, they love it. But when you say evil big tobacco, they love that. That's, oh, they're a big bully, right? They don't. But when you laugh at them, it suggests that you know they're vulnerable, and they do not like that. So I urge ridicule and parody and humor. More cigarettes, obviously, we opened that up to the kids, and we had a whole, let's see if I had that, well, we had a whole moron competition. So we gave them the brand, and we said, do moron. And we have the most creative moron cigarette ads. This is one of your handouts. This is what we carried around the Ebony Factory. We organized a little demonstration we call the house calls, because we were mostly doctors. Here's your moron ad. I mean, we gave them the brand, and we have at it. Let's just do moron cigarettes. So Uptown, this was a brand that was supposed to be aimed at the upscale young blacks, so we created Upchuck. I mean, just anything you can do to make fun of their products. This whole notion of glamour, of sophistication. We had a young lady, you know, looking a whole lot better than that. And sometimes you don't need words. You don't need words, you know, you want people wondering, what is she up there for? We want billboards with just beautiful people. You don't need any slogans. How about just a nice young couple? We want people to say, what is that? We want to bother people. We want people to not have to have don't smoke everywhere. Maybe we can be more subtle and have people scratch. What is that? Get people talking about it. Don't hit people over the head with messages. We have a president who has signed in the FDA bill, and I give him all the credit in the world for making this part of his administration. But don't be complacent. That's the message I brought to you today. Because this is just a couple of years ago. This is the Intercultural Cancer Council praising Diversity Inc., a magazine, that named MD Anderson Cancer Center one of the top 50 places for diversity hiring. Guess which one was #1 of Diversity Inc., the top 50 companies for diversity in 2005? Altria, which is Philip Morris. Notice altruistic. They renamed the company to Altria. Innovation comes from diverse people and places. They are still playing the race card. They've been doing it. They will never stop. This is the company that wants to be your friend and will defend it. The top 50, right there at the very top, is Altria. And a letter from the president of MD Anderson Cancer Institute went out urging people to support the sponsors of Diversity Inc. So in my mailbox 2 months ago, this arrives, February 4th, 2011. I'd like to invite you to be there when Barbara Frankel and I unveil the 2011 Diversity Inc. Top 50 Companies for Diversity, and one of the sponsors is Altria. They were named #8 among hiring of African Americans this year. So it's still going on. We don't need to support that. We don't need to be a part of that, just like those U.S. News and World Report ratings of colleges. You had a speaker this morning, Vice Chancellor, that was as good a speaker, and Pine Bluff sounds to me like as wonderful a campus. Your Dean of Education inspired me. You don't need to worry about where you rank on things if U.S. News and World Report, which for decades took more cigarette ads than any other news magazine. You need to look let go of these rankings, and they need to stop this nonsense of appealing to people as a top company. Philip Morris, believe me, is not a top company for African Americans. But it goes further, because the Black Caucus is still getting money from the tobacco industry, and you've got to stop assuming that congressmen and other political leaders are your friends if they're still taking blood money from the tobacco industry. Congressional Black Caucus, and it talks about how the tobacco companies were a leading funder of this particular event. Well, I brought you a message of hope, I hope. It's something that I'd like you to, I warned you it was going to be a little hazardous to your preconceptions. I just want to close with something that I created at the last National Conference on Tobacco Health. It's called Your Drugstore and Cancer Center.
I'm Alan Blum. I'm the Chief Registered Pharmacist here at your Drugstore and Cancer Center at the National Conference on Tobacco Health. And we sell only FDA-approved tobacco products. One-stop shopping for all your prescription cigarette and chemotherapy needs. We're also opening up a chain of retail clinics within our pharmacy so you can get your cigarettes and other tobacco products and get your health care at the same time. It's really all about money, and it's big bucks. We have the actual contents of a convenience store that I purchased, and we just decided to construct the pharmacy entirely of cigarette products and their advertisements. Because, in effect, about 8% of tobacco, 8% of chain drugstore profits.
So I'm talking about Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid.
Sales are cigarettes in the chain drugstore. So Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, Walmart are still making big bucks off the single most important cause of death and disease. And you know something, that there are actually more drugstores that sell cigarettes today in 2009 than sold them in 1980, because that's when the pharmacists were needing to stop selling cigarettes because of health. But they've been wiped out by the big chains. So I hope you enjoy your prescription.
The big chains have wiped out the independent pharmacists. You actually have more selling cigarettes today.
Pharmacists here, Dr. Cummings and Dr. Istron and Dr. Dunnington. And I'll just take you on a little outside tour. It's our buddy from 10 years ago, Joe Camel. Just a variety of your tobacco products. Our landscaping are some of the promotions that we've collected over the years.
Now that's not litter, is it?
Oh, no. Well, it's up to you. If you'd like some, you can have it. And the kids that come to our stores, they get to enjoy some of the free tobacco products. Buy one, get one free.
wanted to thank Richard Reedus for helping do all the audiovisual, which was complex, and the mayor and everybody else. I hope I brought you a message of hope. I think we ought to be able to leap tall buildings at a single bound, and to be faster than a speeding bullet in turning this issue around, and above all, to be more powerful than a locomotive in setting what I call a super health example for our communities. So we do have I want to thank Tony and Dr. Dressler and everybody else. But maybe we could wind up with a couple minutes of questions? Yeah. Okay, just a few minutes of questions, and I know that there was some because I planted some. But let's even criticisms, whatever you want to do. Just anything we'd like to comment or question.
Define smoking preference.
Define smoking preference, meaning in terms of what brand you buy?
Right.
That's basically it. That's what I ask all my patients. I don't say, do you smoke and how much do you smoke? I say, what brand do you buy? And the invariable answer is today among African Americans, 80% buy menthol brands. Among Caucasian teenagers, 80% buy Marlboro. So it's a very racial issue when it comes down to teenagers. It's either Newport or Marlboro, and you know who's doing it. That's preference. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, this was not our planted question.
Okay.
But given the tremendous financial influence of the tobacco industry, is there any chance that the United States will ever ratify the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control?
The Framework Convention on Tobacco Control is an international agreement forged in Switzerland to try to get all the nations of the world to beat back the influence of the tobacco industry. Perhaps you can explain it better than me, Pinky, because I'm not fully understanding all the things that it wants to do.
Well, the guiding principle of the FCTC is that the interests of the tobacco industry are not compatible with the interests of public health. Right now, the new FDA bill has non-voting membership on the Scientific Advisory Council.
The tobacco industry sits on the FDA committee, even though they're non-voting. The tobacco industry gets to sit in on the FDA discussions.
And they also recommend a ban on all tobacco advertising. Is there any way that the Senate, if we could sign it, could we comply?
Well, this is counterintuitive, but my first love in the United States is the First Amendment. And having been sued by Philip Morris for some of my spoof ads, this had to do with Miller Beer, where we created a killer beer campaign. We were sued in state and federal court. And they wanted all the names of our organization, just like they wanted the communists in the 1950s. This was a big lawsuit. I had nobody to defend me. I got the American Civil Liberties Union, and they did a good job. And we won the case. We agreed not to do anything that would violate the First Amendment. But the point is, the First Amendment gives you the right to ridicule a tobacco company. Many of these companies, many of these countries that are talking big about a ratification of a treaty do not have the freedoms that we enjoy in the United States. So I will disagree that this treaty is going to make a whole lot of difference. Unless you have an understanding of the First Amendment, it gives you the right to do far more than a treaty will do. You can say anything you want about the cigarette companies, and I think that's as it should be. In other countries, if you dare to speak up, you will be sued or silenced. And we were silenced in this country for a very long time. But I think the First Amendment trumps any ban on cigarette advertising. Would I rather have cigarette advertising back with all those billboards? Yes, because I think counter-advertising laughs them out of town. Sometimes we're aiming at an enemy that most people don't fully see, and they don't understand why we're so upset about smoking, because they don't see all the billboards we used to see. In many ways, it's harder for me to explain how insidious the tobacco industry is even today. So we've been reduced to counting the number of little signs on convenience stores and claiming, see how they're going after kids? Well, compared to what we had 20 years ago, it's nothing. But they're on the internet. They're giving a lot of their cost in advertising is not in big advertisements anymore. It's in giving 3 packs for 1 or carton for half price. It's in discounting. That's considered advertising. And it's in couponing. It's in mail order. It's in amazing ways that we hadn't thought of, that we banned. We banned some things, or the industry agreed to get off billboards. They just knew they'd be in other media. And we know how advanced social media is today. We're not even on PCs anymore. We're on our little iPads. And so I think the important thing is to look at the cigarette companies knew what they were doing when they agreed to the master settlement. They were not stupid. I think it served to their advantage. I think the jury is out, even though we've had these conferences. What would have happened if we hadn't had the master settlement? We wouldn't have had a lot of the money that we had. What would have happened if we don't have a treaty? I don't think anything will happen. I don't think anything either which way. We need indigenous grassroots efforts. And the money will run out. You have to say, will we do this anyway if we don't get the grant? That's what we did. I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth. That's what I did when I had no money. We got it among ourselves. We got doctors who were cheap. And they paid in dues. And we created posters for them for their offices. And we gave them a newsletter. But we needed the money to buy the counter ads. You have to raise money locally. I know it's harder than ever. Or you have to get volunteers that are clever and want to do this. And the kids are good. But don't turn it over to the children. The kids are good, but they don't know what you know. I don't care how you want to say it. I wouldn't want kids being manipulated by R.J. Reynolds, and I don't want them manipulated by me. I want to give kids a free choice of not to buy cigarettes, but I don't think I have to tell them. I think I have to work with them and let them see, and let's join together in this. So again, these are counterintuitive comments. I don't necessarily think money is the answer, and I don't think the treaty is the answer. But I hope that answers your question.
Cheers, thank you.
Okay. One or two, yes, excuse me, go ahead.
What's your opinion on substituting spitting tobacco with nicotine gum?
What a great question. What's the difference between spitting tobacco, which is cheaper than Nicorette? Notice the price of Nicorette, pretty expensive. Now, and granted, these companies had to do all those research studies, and they cost a lot of money. So I respect the pharmaceutical industry for having done the trials that led to the approval of these products. But if you go back to Nicorette, do you know how many people they studied to get Nicorette approved on the market? They only approved it on the basis of 2 studies. And they were side effect studies. They broke open the study and they were looking at oral side effects, and they found in that study that those who had used it stopped smoking at a greater rate. There weren't very many studies that showed that, but it was approved. And then originally Nicorette was only going to be by prescription. The companies insisted that you had to use Nicorette in a comprehensive program of behavioral modification, that the drug itself was no good. You had to have counseling, you had to work with people, you had to do behavior modification. And how quickly did they drop that? By making it OTC and then forgetting about all the counseling. And that's why Chantix has moved in, or Zyban before that, saying just give them a drug. Here is an actual discussion that I heard between a physician and a patient after hours. He's on the phone, and I overhear him saying, "Oh, that's right, you smoke. Well, let me call in a prescription for this new drug, Chantix, and call me in 12 weeks and see how you do." That was it. That was the total intervention. So you say, well, back to the issue of spitting tobacco versus Nicorette. Spitting tobacco is cheaper. Why don't you just recommend that they do that for an oral substitute? Whatever you put in your mouth, I think has to be with the guidance of a buddy, of a pal, with groups, with a physician, with nurse, with counselor, with quitline, whatever, to encourage you that it's not just the spitting tobacco that'll do it, it's not just the Nicorette. You've got to work on tips, and you've got to get rid of both of these products, cigarettes and the Nicorette, or cigarettes and the spitting tobacco. So in answer to your question, I think they probably are of equal use because the spitting tobacco is cheaper, but I think you're playing with fire when you substitute nicotine and you use it for beyond a certain level of time. Now, there's a new theory that's coming out. Dr. Cummings at Roswell Park Cancer Institute, who I respect and I work with, he believes that is the lesser of 2 evils. If people want to continue on these oral nicotine products forever, then that's going to be better than smoking in any count. So again, you see the harm reduction element there? I understand it. I feel it's a defeat when we have to resign ourselves to saying, okay, we'll just use Nicorette forever or just use spitting tobacco forever. I don't want to see people using nicotine products. So what I recommend is that you write down the website, www.whyquit.com. Whyquit.com. I love it. Having you in the audience, just great. But John Polito was a lawyer who smoked for 30 years, and he got off cigarettes. He was so upset, so angry that he'd done this to himself. He learned from a physician in Illinois who he'd heard lecture. And now all of that physician's lectures are on this website. There must be 70 hours of material on this. I give it to all my patients to look up, because you're buddying up with people, or you're reading their stories, you're learning tips, and you're understanding that nicotine is not necessarily good. So I don't believe in the GlaxoSmithKline phrase, nicotine can be a lifesaver. I would rather not have people on nicotine at all. And John Polito's website, whyquit.com, will help a lot of people to try to get off this crap forever, entirely. Thank you for asking. Go ahead.
I was curious, a lot of your
Okay.
pieces that you showed dealt with businesses and other entities and politicians. Are you doing anything as an anti-tobacco campaign where it comes to faith-based institutions, where it's a wide sphere of influence there, especially in our African American and other ethnic minority communities, especially when it comes to, since it's such a big effort now with our smokeless tobacco like snus and those others, what have you been working on?
Wonderful question. Personally, I did work in Houston with faith-based organizations. I learned very quickly the ministerial groups were the heart and soul of working in black communities. Deloitte is Afrocentric. Deloitte was a good friend of mine. I met him helping to run this SHAPE Center. And I'm aware that there were certain tensions in the community, and I helped smooth those over because faith-based organizations really are so very important in inspiring people. I don't know ultimately what the verdict's going to be. I'm not disappointed, but I think they could have been doing more. You don't hear of too many religious groups. The first that I am aware of was the Interfaith Council in North Carolina, Interfaith Council on Churches. It was a Methodist group in the 1980s, early 1980s, that tried to look at their state's dilemma, tobacco. Now that was the leading tobacco state, taking it on the chin by an interfaith ministry, and they did have some meetings, and it worried the tobacco industry terribly. And then, of course, you had the Southern Baptists moving in, saying that we thought of it first, and there was a kind of a competition. I wish the competition had continued. I want to see competition among all faith-based groups competing to who can best defeat this menace. It's something that let's look forward to more involvement. I hope that addresses your question. I wish there had been more involvement, and again, Benjamin Hooks, Jesse Jackson, these are ministerial leaders, and they did not help us. They did not speak up when it counted, and I wished I could report to you that everything has been rosy in this issue. That's why I brought some of this hard-hitting material. But thank you for asking the question. We had one last one? Okay. Thank you again.
All right, let's go. Dr. Bloom, we'd like to thank you for your wonderful presentation, for coming out. Of course, you already have one of these Arkansas Traveler Awards.
That's great.
30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Well, here's another one to add to the collection.
Thank you.
Thank you once again.
And I know, too, this state has been rated #1 in 2008 by the CDC in how it's gone about its activities. Dr. Dressler, really, congratulations, not just on past glories, but what you're doing today. There's a spirit in this room that I haven't seen very often at all. And I really hope that you'll continue this momentum. And if I can be of any help in any way, 3 in the morning, I do want to maintain contact with you. But you really have something going that very few other states have. Let's hope that you'll be the inspiration for all the other states.